All right. Hi, and welcome to the Data Science Salon Podcast. If you're returning, welcome back. And thank you for being here again. And if you're listening for the first time, we're glad to have you here. Thank you for choosing the DSS podcast. We know there are many choices out there. I'm Anna Annison, your host and the founder of Formulated by Home of the Data Science Salon. And joining us today is Melissa Swift, founder and CEO of Anthrome Insight. And Melissa is a leader in organizational transformation, partnering with businesses to unlock extraordinary outcomes by leveraging data analytics, practical strategies, and a humanist approach to the workplace, which is really important. Melissa is also the author of a book, Work Here Now, Think Like a Human and Build a Powerhouse Workplace, which offers 90 actionable strategies to help organizations and teams to navigate the ever-evolving landscape of work, from unlocking changes in the workplace dynamics to addressing wicked problems that organizations face. Melissa brings a unique perspective on leadership, team building, and organizational development. And in today's episode, we'll discuss her approach to workforce transformation, the future of work, and the strategies that Melissa uses to help organizations and leaders thrive in such a quick, ever-changing environment. So, Melissa, it's such a pleasure to have you with us today.
It's great to be here. I love to talk about data, so I am pumped.
Awesome. So let's go ahead and dive right in. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey and how Anthrome Insights came to be, and maybe just going all the way back to where you started from and kind of where you are today?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've definitely had the jungle gym career, not the career ladder, right? I started off right out of college, did a few years in advertising, went back to business school, spent some time in financial services. And then, very luckily, just before the financial crisis of 2008, got into consulting at Deloitte. And at that time, I was looking at sustainability transformations, right? How can we re-gear business for, kind of a better future? And I ended up, Deloitte sort of exited that business some years later. And it was around the time I was pregnant with my daughter. And I had this moment of kind of, let me rethink, what is my deep passion? And my deep passion is really for the people side of transformation, right? Because that's where so much, that's the big lever, right? To make any organization different. It's the people piece. And so at that time, I pivoted. I ended up taking on leadership roles at different, corporate consulting firms, Korn Ferry, Mercer, Capgemini, wrote the book. And then, as of January of this year, said, look, I think the journey that I'm on, I can do this really well in entrepreneurial space, and founded Anthrome Insight. And that's how I landed here. And it's been a super interesting journey, because that thing of grappling with people and organizations is truly one of our wicked problems out there.
Yes, no, definitely. No, that's an amazing background. Thank you so much for sharing. And in your book, Work Here Now, you share 90 practical strategies, which is a lot of strategies, which is awesome for organizations and teams to really adapt to changing world of work. And now, especially with AI, I feel like this is super, super important. What do you think is the most important shifts that organizations need to make in order to really thrive now, right, in the future of work? Because now it's just people are freaking out, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'll actually cite, there's one strategy that's in there twice, which is, so technically it's 89 strategies, one of which is repeated. But the one that's repeated is just do less. And I actually think embracing a sort of organizational minimalism, right? Of saying, we're going to do fewer things and do them really well. In the AI age, that is, I think, just a recipe for amazingness. Because the reality is, if you can truly narrow strategically, this is what we're going to do, this is what we're going to focus on, that gives you more room then to experiment with technology, to try new directions. It's like, if your house is already cluttered, you can't bring new stuff into the house. So you got to declutter the house. And then maybe you can say, okay, well, actually what we need is this new recliner, the new recliner being AI, right? But I think that piece about doing less and saying not all work is good work, not everything we're doing we need to do, that's like the mindset set shift that leads you on all kinds of really interesting journeys because again, you have space for them.
Yeah, no, that's a great answer. Thanks, Melissa. And your focus on leveraging data analytics and the a humanist view of the workplace. How do you balance the analytical side with the human side of the organizational development, especially when tackling complex challenges in the workplace? And I'm sure like the bigger the workplace, the more challenges there are, right?
Absolutely. So I love this question, right? Because this is the sort of the seminal challenge of people consulting is you want to be evidence driven, you want to be data driven, you want to really use analytics powerfully. But this at the same time, it's people. People are weird, people are chaotic. So for me, it's really about how do we use data and how do we use analytics to actually get to the truth and not skate over the truth. And that is a really hard and a fine line, to walk. So I'll give you for instance, a lot of organizations, just a simple example, really closely track their engagement scores. And I'm not saying don't track your engagement scores, but there are boring questions sitting in everybody's engagement survey that actually give them a lot more information that they never mine out of it. So there's a question in most organizations' engagement surveys that says, I have the tools I need to do my job. And it's like simple and it's boring. And if organizations paid more attention to the answers to that question, right, they would do a better job on everything from process to technology to all different kinds of enablement. There's a lot of interesting information in that question that really gets to like, are human beings thriving in your workplace? But we oftentimes, we use data to kind of skim the surface, and we need to go one click deeper into how is work really getting done.
Yeah, no, that's a great answer. No, that's definitely super important. And you mentioned working with organizations on wicked problems, which I like. That's really, cute, and I think it probably has a meaning. Could you share an example of a particularly challenging problem that you've helped an organization address that could kind of fit in under this wicked problem?
Yeah, so I think a great example is I worked with one organization they had a particular division that was just getting brutally kind of outcompeted in certain ways in the market, right? And that's a classic business problem where competitors are eating our lunch, unexpected competitors are eating our lunch, right? Not the ones we're used to dealing with. And it's a wicked problem because there's not sort of an intuitive, natural place to go to solve. And it's in some ways kind of ownerless too, right? That who actually owns that problem? So we looked at a few different dimensions on a data-driven basis. What were the sort of skills and psychological characteristics of the people in that division? And then what were the organizational characteristics of that division? Kind of how were people working? How were things structured? And so the interesting finding was that they actually had, and this was a cool, energizing finding, really highly skilled, very agile folks, right? The people working in that division were really like sharp and nimble, but the organizational ways of working were super gummed up. That the sort of normal processes of the organization were very slow, and then people had created alternate processes to go around the normal processes that were even slower. And so this was a huge aha for the organization about we've got brilliant people and we've just kind of gummed them up and made them slow. And they ended up making major changes to the structure of the organization as a result of those findings. And that's really great to see because at the end of the day, you see these are great people, they're doing good work, and they made changes that allowed them to do better work, which that's the holy grail. That's what we're going for.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. Congratulations on creating so much impact, and one of the key aspects of your approach is also helping organizations develop leadership and teams that can make real change happen, like you just said. What qualities do you think are most essential for leaders today, especially with AI and everything changing so quickly?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I think leaders today need to be willing to give space to their teams and to be a bit playful themselves. When I think about the leaders who've really Because I think one of the keys to AI, right, is you got to learn how to use it yourself. You got to have some working ability to do it. And to do that, you got to tinker with it. You have to play with it. You can't just like take a training and go do it. There's this tinkering and playing thing. And so leaders who do that themselves and then give their teams, again, the space to do that and don't feel like they need to control every single aspect of everything. I think that's the killer leader for today. But it runs counter to a lot of people's programming, right? We get anxious and we want to control everything. We want to be that command and control leader, but it's the opposite of what's needed.
If you're enjoying listening to my conversation with Melissa, you'll have a chance to enjoy more content like this at our upcoming DSS MIA on September 17th. Use special code DSS Podcast MIA, all uppercase, to save 20% off your registration. No, that's a really great answer. And I also think that, people don't need to use every AI tool, right? I think it's, you only need a couple, maybe even one, and just really know what use cases you have and use it for strategic things, right? So that's what it really is helpful for, right? So, I mean, I think that, what you said definitely makes sense, a ton of sense for sure. Because, and I think that's what hopefully people are realizing that now.
That's the hope.
Yeah, it was going to be about AI and the workplace transformation, because I see so many startups just raising money for all this new workplace, like transformation, like HR, using AI. But what is your take on that? How can organizations better use data to understand their workforce? I mean, it seems like that's like really the key to make people more successful, productive, and then essentially have a better bottom line, right?
Absolutely. Well, if you think about how organizations use people data today, for many organizations, it's pretty rudimentary. And you saw some hiring of, there's a tiny sliver of people analytics folks, and very large organizations will have that in their HR department. But in general, nobody's making good enough use of their people data. So that's the promise of AI, is that if you could just start to get like real insights, when people leave, why are they leaving? What genuinely attracts people to your organization? What are the hallmarks of the most productive people in your organization? What are the hallmarks of your best leaders? Just starting to pull some of these simple insights. And then the next level would be, can AI make connections between data sets? Could you make a connection between, let's say, people's leadership ability and like how you progress their compensation? I'm just making that up, right? But disparate data sets, really putting that together in smart ways. I just think in the people realm, in the workforce transformation realm, there's so much that AI could do for us, partly because we're at such a rudimentary level, even after talking about people data for years.
Yeah, no, 1000%. And that's a great answer. And what about, now that this isn't one of the questions, but what about the privacy part of this? Like, because I know that there's some people that feel like, okay, I don't really want like AI to look at my emails that I'm sharing, right? Like, so how do we get, across those hurdles? Or is that like, should we not be looking at people's like work emails, you know what I mean? Like, what do you think about that? Because I feel like for me, I'm kind of torn about that, because if it's a work email, then like, why should you not be looking at it, right? Like,
yeah, I mean, conceptually on work communications, you have no expectation of privacy. And it's like a very sad thing to say, but that's, you sign all that stuff when you join an organization. That's just reality. But then there's the layer of what does ethical use of that data look like? And I think that's what you're getting at. And it's a fantastic question. And for me, I'm just personally much more comfortable with, we're going to look at employee email sentiment in general to see how we can help our population in general, rather than I'm going to look at Anna's email and see what's going on inside her head, right? I think there is an ethics line there about, if you're using data, and this is how I've always used it in my work, in aggregate, depersonalized, fabulous, right? That as long as, and you do have to take things out. So for instance, if there are certain demographic characteristics where it's such a tiny set of people where you're like, well, our personnel in Alaska think this, and you got one person in Alaska, right? You got to start carving things out of the data set where but For me, I'm much more comfortable in that realm of use than in some of the kind of individual scrutiny and monitoring. Also, because data shows that when individuals feel monitored, it does negatively impact both their well-being and their productivity. So
Yes,
it's
agreed.
generally not a great idea to make your employees feel watched, because they're not as good at their jobs and they feel miserable.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And I think that's why, again, there's like the whole kind of thing about going back to the office too. I feel like it's about watching people, like
Absolutely,
um,
absolutely. And it's so funny because there is some great stuff to. I mean, I did an in-person collaboration session this morning, and it was wonderful. But people forget also the right way to collaborate is generally in a figure eight, where you come together and then you go apart and work on your own. Then you come back together, then you go apart again, and we're like, just sit with each other all the time. No, don't do that. It's
no,
weird.
because that could be actually very distracting to people. And like, really, that's, what I've noticed the small time I've spent in offices is where people just literally stand there with a coffee for like an hour talking to somebody. Like, so I think it's very, with the tools that we have, I think people could really figure out how to collaborate virtually, right? Like successfully. But again,
100%. I mean, I have people that I've worked with at one job virtually and then hired them to another firm, worked with them virtually, and then met them later, right? It
yeah,
is very
and it
possible.
was a success. Yeah, I
Totally
mean, I think if
successful. Yeah.
everybody's committed to the project, right? And you
100%.
shouldn't have people that are not committed to your work, like then that goes back to hiring, right? And like actually hiring correctly. So
Yeah, yeah, and really understanding, what makes people want to join your company. Again, if you really knew these things, then you could make decisions with a confidence where you don't have to go back on the back end and watch people.
yep, no, 1000%. No, and I know that you've led a lot of very diverse, multidisciplinary teams to solve super tough problems. Maybe like this too, where half somebody really on the team wants to be like one of the founders is like, no, we're going to be in the office. The other one's like, no, we're going to be like remote. Like how do you foster collaboration, innovation among really diverse teams, and what lessons have you learned about leading teams to success? Because I think like there's so many things that could come up.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I would say it's like one big lesson in this case. It's that people have to have respect for each other's work. And I know that sounds weird, but when you're leading a team where, like, these people specialize in this, these people specialize in this background, that background, if you come from a fundamental place of like, I may not understand the work you do, but I respect it, that creates the team environment where everyone can collaborate really successfully. Where you have people kind of side eyeing, like, I think what you do is kind of BSy, right? Like, or it's kind of stupid, or I don't understand why we have your capability within the team. It falls apart really
Yeah.
quickly, right? But it also, once it's respect, and it's respect for each other's work. Because I've seen things where people respect each other as people, but then they don't respect each other's work. And if you don't respect the work, how can we work together? It's to
Yeah.
me, that's like the foundational piece.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And I think that's probably goes back to, getting, like either basic psychology and communication skills, right? So
Yeah,
that's how simple it
absolutely.
is. Yeah. And looking at the future, how do you see the workplace continue to evolve, especially with AI? And what are some of the biggest challenges and opportunities do you think leaders and organizations will face in the next 5 and then maybe in the decade? I mean, I know it's really hard now to look a decade ahead. So, but I mean, let me know your thoughts about that.
I think that the biggest opportunity is if we can get humans and technology working better together. And I don't mean just, everyone sees this question as like, we need to just train humans on working better with technology. I don't think it's that. I think we need to develop technology that is more human friendly and think more about humans working like with technology and what that looks like. And we always make the joke, what is it like, Jetsons at home, Flintstones at work. Some of it is, right, that consumer technology is more user friendly. So, you don't sit around and think, gosh, I wish I could work better with my iPhone. Like, nobody thinks that, because it's just fine. It's okay. Everything's okay on the consumer side. But at work, we're like, this system, that system, it's making me nuts, right? So there's a role, and I have a lot of conversations with CIOs where they are thinking a ton about this question. CIOs are very focused on this question of more user-friendly technology. But it's also like, how do we build processes and workflows and team constructs where humans and technology are kind of not at odds with each other? I feel like the organizations that get that right are going to be the big winners, I think, of the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, no, that's a great answer. And the last question I'm going to ask you is about what advice would you give organizations to really make their workplaces more adaptable, resilient, and really aligned with the demands of the modern world and the modern employee?
I think some of it is just listen to your employees with a really neutral lens. I think organizations often get defensive about employee feedback. They're like, oh, they're whiny and they're complaining again. And it's like, if you treat what your employees are telling you in surveys, formally, informally, conversations with their bosses, water cooler, whatever it is, just treat it as data. It's just data. Don't have an emotional reaction to it. And you say, okay, I've been given this, and it's not like, oh, we need to drive adoption of this system. Only 5% of people are using the system. No, that's data. Maybe only 5% of people are using the system because the way you have it set up right now kind of stinks. It's data. Use it as data, make smart decisions based on that data, and just be neutral about it. And I think, again, the organizations that are really successful do that. They hear things and they learn from them and they adapt and they evolve, and they don't have like this defensive emotional thing going on.
That's a great answer and a great, some great advice for these organizations. And Melissa, thank you so much for sharing your incredible insights into the future of work leadership and organizational transformation. And your work is truly making a difference in how organizations approach their workforce challenges. And we've learned so much today about the strategies that can really help drive success and create those thriving workplaces that we all want to work and be a part of. And for our listeners, be sure to check out Melissa's book, Work Here Now, to explore the 89 practical strategies for transforming your workplace. And don't forget to follow us for more insights on building workplaces. And also share the episode with your network and stay tuned for more exciting conversations with industry leaders. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed hearing my chat with Melissa, you can enjoy more content like this at our upcoming event, Data Science Salon Miami, which will take place in Wynwood on September 17th. We're going to talk about the future of applied AI in the enterprise. Don't forget to register and make sure to use that special code, DSS MIA podcast, all uppercase.